what's up, everybody? This is Brandon, the host of the Simply podcast. I want to thank you all for tuning in today. We have special guest Greg Dickerson. Greg, how you doing today?
Doing great, Brandon. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. The unexpected cold weather in April just can't, it makes for fun. So, Greg, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you located?
I'm in Charlottesville, Virginia. My territory has been most of my career from the Outer Banks of North Carolina up into the DC area. Military brat, military family, so I've lived all over. I've lived out on the West Coast in San Francisco, San Diego, and Long Beach. I was stationed at Long Beach when I went in the Navy, right out of high school. And then lived in Virginia Beach. That's where I'm from. All my family's from there. Moved to the Outer Banks of North Carolina in 1997. That's where I started my little remodeling handyman company that I built into a $30 million building business in 7 years. Started 12 other companies along the way, did hundreds of millions of dollars in real estate deals along the way. Started with one little lot flip. That was my first deal. And, learned from people that were coming down there doing, buying houses, renovating them and renting them out, doing the old short-term rental strategy back in, this was in 1997, 98, before VRBO, Airbnb, and Bigger Pockets wasn't even around, none of that stuff. So, I'm old school, go all the way back to those days. I was flipping houses in the Virginia Beach area and doing development deals on the Outer Banks. And then, started doing more commercial multifamily after that. Sold that first company in 2004, 2005, reinvested all the profits into bigger real estate deals and, just grew and scaled everything from there. So I've done, hundreds of millions of dollars in real estate deals, all types, development ground up, as well as, land development, subdivisions, a lot of value add, flipped hundreds of houses, remodeled, probably over 1,000 houses and commercial buildings in the career. And, built a lot of high-end custom homes. Most of those were short-term rentals, $1 million beach houses, those types of things. And then, now I coach and mentor people all over the country and around the world doing all kinds of cool things. I'm a co-founder at a tech startup, and I invest in markets and crypto and, kind of a little different stage in my life from where I was back then when we were doing, 30, 40 multi-million dollar projects a year. But now, I do fewer, bigger deals and help other people, learn and do what I've done.
That's awesome. That's it's really cool to hear that you progressed from a handyman kind of home remodeling business in the beginning to kind of what you've gotten to now.
Yeah, I'm your classic serial entrepreneur. And the neat thing is, like I said, I didn't go to college. I went in the Navy right out of high school. I started with absolutely nothing. I had no money, no backers, no credit. It was just me, my truck, and my tools. And I got started with that. And what I did was, I was very fortunate. I'm self-educated, even though I didn't go to college. I've always poured into myself personally, professionally. I've spent hundreds of thousands on my education. And I've probably, spent millions in opportunity cost on learning what I know now, making mistakes along the way. But the big thing that I did was, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And what I got out of that book was not what most people get. Most people want to be Robert and Kim. They want to do the real estate thing. What I got out of Rich Dad, Poor Dad was I wanted to be Rich Dad. I wanted to be the guy that everybody was coming to with all the deals, that was like, coaching and mentoring everybody in all the different businesses, and then taking all that cash flow and reinvesting in other assets. So that's what I did. I set out and I became Rich Dad, and I started, a bunch of different companies and built them up, sold them off, reinvested all the profits, in other assets. I had one or two main businesses that generated all the cash flow that, I was able to fund all my deals with. So, that's how I did that. And then, the way I got into development was, there were other successful investors and developers that were coming down to my area, buying beach houses and buying land. And, I was doing work for them. And I started learning from them what they were doing, why they were doing it, how they were doing it from a finance standpoint, as well as just the, strategic logistics of what we were doing. And started doing projects with and for, other developers and investors from other areas. And the really cool thing where the light bulb really went off for me, the first deal I ever did, like I said, was a little lot flip. It was a friend of mine that, called me up. He knew that I was successful. He said, hey, there's this lot over here that we can buy. I think it was $100,000. He said, you put up all the money. My dad has a client that'll buy it from us. We can make a profit and we'll split that. And I'll do all the work. All you have to do is put up the money. And I said, well, how much can we make? He said, I don't know, maybe 15,000 a piece. And I said, how long? He said, like 30 days. I was like, really? You can do that? He's like, yeah. I said, okay, let's do it. So I gave him the money. He took care of everything else. 30 days later, he handed me $115,000 back. And I thought that was just like the greatest thing in the world. Yeah. And, but what triggered in my mind there was land position. So I understood from that point how valuable the land was becoming in the area that we were in, because there was limited inventory. There wasn't a lot of resales on the market, kind of like right now. So inventory levels are, constrained all across the country in most markets, and that's when building and development becomes a better vehicle than trying to buy something. So what I did was I went and I started tying up all the land I could, buying all the land I could, developing it, and I would flip the lots to my investors. Then I would build them a house, and then I was building spec houses too at the same time. And it was just, it was a really, really good time to be in the business. So, that's kind of my journey.
Gotcha. So you started flipping a lot, and then you were buying the lot, selling it to the investor, and then they were hiring you to build their house on top of that land?
Yeah. And usually I was flipping the land for at least 50, sometimes, 100% what I paid for it. So
yeah,
those lots were $100,000, $200,000. So I'd flip them for 150 to 200,000 other than my oceanfront lots. So I'd buy, oceanfront hotels and tear them down. And then I would flip those lots to the investors and then build them houses. Sometimes I'd keep one or two for myself. Those were a little better deals. That's where, you could, I don't know, I was buying those for 600,000 or 700,000 and selling them for like 9 million or 900,000. So, it would be, 6 to 8 lots would be 4 to 9 million for those projects. So those were a lot of fun.
Yeah. And when you're talking ocean, I also live on the coast, is landlocked. There's only so many lots. So once they become fewer and fewer, the price continues to drive up and up.
Yeah. Where are you located?
Charleston.
Oh yeah. Charleston, South Carolina. Yeah. So
yes,
yeah, I mean, when it comes to oceanfront, bayfront, waterfront property, they just, you're just not making any more. I mean, there's been some land reclamation projects done here and there. There was a big one done on the Outer Banks where this March Island was turned into a community. But, that stuff's extremely difficult to impossible almost to get done anymore. So, that's kind of the key when you're talking about, uniqueness of properties, when you're talking about views in the mountains, waterfront, whether it's lakes, rivers, streams, ocean, bays, whatever. But the key to that market was the closer you were to the ocean, the more rental income the property would generate and the higher the value. So it was almost like you had oceanfront, then you had the row right across the street semi, then you'd have a street, then you'd have, lots behind that. And, so the further you move back, the less the value was, it kind of stepped down and the less the rental income was. So to really maximize the income, oceanfront was where it's at. So that's what I specialized at. That was where the biggest monies were made per, property. And, that's where the biggest houses were built and things like that. And it was all about the cash flow. I mean, these, I was building these, 8, 10, 12 and 16 bedroom houses that were generating anywhere from $180,000 to $380,000 a year in, rental income. So, I mean, these were just short-term rental properties on steroids.
Yeah. And you're doing it before the craze of short-term rentals are what they are now. You said you're doing it were you doing this in the 90s or did you start in 2000s with building these kind of bigger oceanfront stuff?
Yeah. So my first big properties started in probably 2000, 2001, I think was when I did my first big ones. Before that, I was doing little ones. I started out building little beach boxes, 3-bedroom, 2-bath. So I started in, I got there in 97, started my first spec house, I think it was 99, somewhere around there when I got an actual general contractor's license and started, built my first house. But it was a little 3-bedroom, 2-bath beach box that, I don't know, back then probably cost $100,000 to build.
Yeah.
And then I started building the multi-million-dollar homes where the kitchens alone were $100,000. It was a really interesting evolution. Then fast forward to 08, 09, all of that got shut down. There was no business, no work, just like Charleston. I don't know if you were in the business then, but I had about $40 million worth of projects going, commercial and residential. And, everything just shut down. The bank shut down. You couldn't get permanent financing on, properties that I just finished with construction loans on the back end. So anyways, once all that wound up, 2010, 11, I just went back to starting to build, little beach houses again, that were at that time, I think they were 125 to 150,000 is what they were costing, after building, $1 million beach houses. It was really interesting how that came full circle, but those were still good. You could still make 100,000, to 150,000 a house on those.
Yeah, no, I go back and look. So Folly Beach is the beach that my wife and I live close to and kind of hang out at. And I go back and even look what stuff was selling for 10 years ago, 2012, 2013, and what they're selling for now. And I'm like, man, it's hard to believe that just 10 years ago in the spot where these homes are multi-million-dollar homes on the beach now, we're selling for hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
Next to nothing compared to what, and I look and I'm like, how did somebody not see the value of the beach then or whatever it was? But yeah, it's so you could do them all, and there's all shapes and sizes. But of course, now all the new stuff's being built is 10 bedrooms, 9 bedrooms. Because the more people you can get in a house, the closer it is to the water, the more you can rent it for.
Yeah, exactly. And it's all, economies of scale. The little houses are doing well. I mean, I've got some clients I coach in the Airbnb space that are doing ground up short-term rentals.
Yep.
And I mean, he's doing stuff ground up cabins in the mountains at 250 to 300,000 all in. And those are netting him after everything, after all expenses, operating costs, debt service, 50 to 60,000 a year. So they're grossing almost 100,000 a year on these little things that, that used to be a 6 or 7 bedroom house on the oceanfront, and probably about a 5 or 6 bedroom, now will do 100 to 150,000 a year in gross rents. But those beach houses are much more expensive to operate, and you have a shorter season a lot of times,
Yeah.
So that business has really evolved, the whole Airbnb thing. And, and it's not for every property everywhere. A lot of people are getting hurt in that right now because the pandemic opened up a lot of opportunity for Airbnb. I mean, you could almost Airbnb anything, anywhere. Now, the properties that aren't in, the typical tourist destinations, vacation destinations where you have those drivers of vacation demand are kind of taking a hit. And if you're not in a real year-round market, your income's kind of limited. So when I'm talking about those numbers that we were doing, 180, 200, 300,000 a year, that was only in 28 weeks. So down there, you had a 28-week season. So you're only renting half the year. So these other Airbnb properties, like, my clients have in the mountains, they're renting those probably 48 to 50 weeks out of the year, almost every week, week in and week out. They have very few weeks that they're not renting. So it's a very different animal, different market right now. And then, the properties that I was doing, and even still today, what's really interesting is, the traditional property management companies that I used to put my properties with that managed them, they had these week to week check-in, check-outs. So you checked in on a Saturday, you checked out on a Sunday, you checked in on a Sunday, you checked out on a Saturday. It was kind of week to week like that, instead of doing the flexible check-in. And a lot of them still haven't even evolved to that model now. So there's still a lot of old school thinking in that industry on the coast, in a lot of these regions, like in Outer Banks, the Folly Beach, the way they used to do things. So, that VRBO and Airbnb has really, changed the game for vacation rentals.
It has. And we had a guest on a couple episodes ago that specialized in short-term rentals. And the other thing that we talked about for there is also what's hurting people is being a good operator of these homes.
Yeah.
Because that's one thing where people are getting hurt is owning a nice house in a nice area, but then on top of it, being a good operator of that home. And I told him a story. We stayed in a 12-bedroom house in Myrtle Beach for a little gathering that we had. They had no toilet paper, no soap, no dish soap. And basically their welcome email was, hey, go out and buy this stuff for your house. You're spending $2,500 a night, but you need to go out and buy all these things so that you can then take care of our house. And I was like, man, I'd much rather just go stay at a hotel.
Yeah, that's happening too. There's a little bit of that shift going on in the Airbnb market, but that's going to create opportunities, right? For wholesalers, house flippers, there's going to be opportunity. I mean, it's a difficult time right now if you're in that business. The people that I coach in that space, they're having a hard time finding deals in a lot of markets. And, it seems like it's going to continue to get a little bit more difficult here in the near term, unless and until rates go up and, higher and stay up higher for a lot longer. I mean, they've got to be over 7%, but now you're getting the creative, mortgages coming back into play, the buy downs and things like that are keeping interest rates low. I mean, you can still get a 3.5% interest rate with a buy down. So that's keeping pressure on the space. But, that's why I have a lot of clients that I've been coaching over the years, flipping houses. I had one couple that they were in the business 6 years before they started with me. They'd never made more than a couple $100,000. And, I put them in some programs and systems like Simply, I had them using that. And they had no CRM that they were using or database or anything. And they went from a couple $100,000 a year after 6 years of being in the business flipping houses. 1 year with me, they made 1.3 million. Just by helping them get the right systems in place, working on some negotiation, techniques, showing them how to raise capital so they can do more deals, that kind of stuff. But, just really systemizing and, making their business more efficient. But, right now there's such a lack of inventory that I've got a lot of people that are shifting into development, starting to do spec houses and teardowns and, things like that, I used to do a lot of, and really taking advantage of that opportunity right now.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, because that's interesting. We haven't talked to anybody yet about doing any development, teardowns, land stuff. What would you recommend to somebody that's wanting to get started? Where's a place to go to learn about that, to learn a little bit about, land and new construction or teardowns and stuff like that?
Yeah. So, I've got courses. I've got some really inexpensive courses on real estate development where you can learn that. I also have a YouTube channel where I've got a lot of content on real estate development. So that's really the best way to do it, to educate yourself. I don't know of any other resources out there that really talk about how to build spec houses and, how to get into development. That's why I did it, because nobody else was really talking about it. And then really the best way to learn is, once you educate yourself, usually this is going to be somebody that's coming from the house flipping game. So they're going to know the market, things like that. You got to really drill down on what's the sweet spot in the market, what's the price point that's going to sell. Then you have to reverse engineer that, and you got to go meet some builders, talk to some builders, get the right builders that understand spec house development, things like that. Other investor builders, to hire to do the projects for you. And if you're a house flipper and you're self-performing and you've got project managers, you can hire somebody that builds houses to come work for you. Some of the big builders are laying off and cutting back, so there's people out there looking for work. They can come in and work for you and teach you how to build houses. And that's how I did it. So I'd never built a house before. I built a house. So what I did was I went and recruited people that were working for other builders in the area, superintendents. I brought them on board to work for me and turned them loose and had them build the houses for me. And I learned from them. So that's really the way to do it. You hire a general contractor to do the work for you, or you hire a project manager if you're a general contractor and you're licensed to come on board for you that understands how to build ground up. Then it's just identifying the right land in the right area, understanding your costs, being able to get the financing, understanding how that works. And, it takes a little bit longer. It takes you 6 to 8 months to build a house in most areas. So, it's a little bit longer of a cycle. So you got to have all the things that, go in with that. But, when there's no inventory, it can be a great business model. And, I've got several clients that I'm helping them scale that business as well.
Is there anything specific you look for in land? Do you go talk to the county? Do you talk to the city? Are there certain types of land that you like to look at for development? Let's say not talking, beach type stuff, but just infill lots or some development. Are there certain things that you're looking for when it comes to that?
Yeah. So initially, the easiest way to get started, what I started with is scattered, infill development, scattered lot infill development. So those are lots that are in between, already built existing homes in mature subdivisions. They already have roads, utilities, everything's in. It's just a vacant lot that never got built on. There's some videos on my YouTube channel that I just recently went through a couple of neighborhoods in Florida, and I talked about this business model of infill scattered lot development and what to look for and how it works. So that's really what you look for, is just, vacant lots in good areas where houses are selling. And for whatever reason, it just didn't get built on. Either, somebody just bought a house to keep somebody from building next to them, or bought a lot to keep somebody from building next to them, or the developer didn't develop on it. Could be any number of reasons. So, that's the easiest thing to target right now in a lot of areas. And you'd be surprised how many, mature subdivisions have vacant lots that were not built on. And then you have the tear down where, you can find either an old house, might be sitting on 2 or 3 lots and you tear it down, or a building that might be sitting on multiple lots and you tear it down. I do a lot of those. That's another way to do it. Again, it's usually in a mature subdivision where it's either a house or something sitting on multiple lots. I had one that I did that was an old, army trailer barracks army trailer kind of thing. So when people were coming back from World War II, the army was making these prefab structures, like trailers almost, that they would put on a foundation and provide housing for people coming out of the army. And this was one of those things that was sitting on 3 lots. So I went there, tore it down, and I had to put a little bit of utilities in to service it. But those are really good plays as well. Sometimes a house can be sitting on a property line. You can get a boundary line adjustment to peel off a lot. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to do it, but that's the easiest thing to start with, is just scattered infill lots.
Gotcha. Yeah, because they'll already have all the hard work, at least when it comes to developing land, done. If it's an established neighborhood, you're just making sure the lot's cleared and then graded down and essentially can build on top of that.
Well, then you have to be cleared and graded down. So that's the other key, is it could be fully wooded. It could be, it could have some undulating topography. You just need to understand what's required to clear it and to fill it, and what your limitations are and requirements are in those regards. Sometimes they're flat and ready to go. It's just grass and people have been mowing it. Sometimes it's got trees. Sometimes you just never know. So it doesn't have to be cleared, ready to go. But those are even easier. Yeah.
And then and so then your goal from there is to try to build the house for less, I would say, price per square foot for what they're selling for. Is that pretty much the quick rule of thumb?
Yeah, and typically, your development cost is generally going to be lower than replacement, or lower than, what's existing homes are selling for, because when inventory is constrained like this, house prices go up. So generally it's cheaper to build than it is to buy. And that's when development, becomes more attractive. Also, people like newer and will pay more for newer. So, that's where you have that delta as well. But yeah, the key is you got to understand what are the prices, what's the market selling for, what are the prices, and you do your, reverse pricing just like you do for a flip. What's it going to sell for? Subtract your, sales costs, closing costs, holding costs, subtract your build costs, subtract your land cost, and then there's, how much you want to make.
Gotcha.
Or you can do it the other way around. Say, look, I want to make 100 grand. So you take that, add what it costs to build the house, the cost of the lot, all that, and just, do it the other way. So, that's kind of how it works.
Is financing any different when it comes to getting loans for doing like a new construction lot for the investment side?
Yeah, it's quite a bit different. So you can use private money, you can use hard money. There's hard money lenders, private lenders that'll lend on new construction. You can also use bank financing, and bank financing is a little bit different. Some banks have a construction to perm, depending on what your exit strategy is. And you can do multiple exit strategies. So you can build to rent. That's a really popular thing right now because there's no inventory. So there's entire subdivisions of thousands of homes going up right now that are purposely built to rent. Single family homes, they're called horizontal apartments. And, so that's a thing right now. So if you want to have exit strategies, you can rent it long-term, you can rent it mid-term, you can rent it short-term, you can sell it. So there's a lot of different avenues you can go. So you just want to have that end goal in mind. But anyways, back to the bank financing, it's a little bit different with construction in terms of, how the bank does it. Some banks will only do the construction loan, and then you got to get another lender to do permanent financing on it for a mortgage if you're going to keep it. Other banks will do, construction revolving lines of credit. So you can do multiple properties, and then there's, some mortgage companies that will do a construction or perm loan. So a little bit different, but the qualifications are the same as if you're going to buy a house to, live in it or rent it. They're going to look at your, tax returns, your credit score, your finances, things like that.
Generally, do you have to own the land and then use the land as collateral to then go get the construction loan? Or can you get one loan that will do everything? Obviously private, you can work with a private investor and kind of get whatever you want. But when it comes to hard money or bank financing, do you have to already own the land or purchase it to then go get the construction loan?
No, and generally you never want to buy the land and take the land down until you get your building permit. You want to go through that and get your building permit first. Now, if it's in an area where you're almost guaranteed you can get a permit for what you want to build,
okay,
then you're okay. But you definitely need to go through the process and make sure and have your contract contingent upon being able to build what you want to build. So you can take it through the entire permit process before you close and get that permit. But yeah, the bank will provide, a loan to take down the lot and provide the funds to build. And they will lend you, typically, depends, like right now, banks are a little squirrely because of what's been going on with the banking situation and interest rates. But generally, they're going to loan you anywhere, depending on what it is, 70 to 80%, sometimes 90 of the appraised value or your cost, whichever is less. So that's what they're going to do. So if your appraised value comes in less than the cost, you got to make up the difference. They're only going to lend you a certain percentage of that appraised value or cost, whichever is less. But that's between the lot and the construction combined.
Okay, gotcha. That's a good tip. I would have never thought it makes sense to get your building permit approved before you buy the land, so you're not stuck with land that you can't build on.
Exactly, or not build what you want to build, or all of a sudden, just like I've got a client in Florida doing a multifamily project, and we were getting ready to submit for permits, and we found out that the county had just initiated a moratorium on any new development permits because they didn't have water and sewer capacity because they're growing so fast. This is in the villages in Florida. It's just blowing up, exploding. So a lot of these areas, your area especially, is experiencing a lot of growth.
Yep.
So cities and counties will stop, issuing permits until they get caught up with, water and sewer capacity. So, or it could be utilities, or it could be school capacities. I mean, any number of reasons. When I was building on the beach, I was building the giant beach houses, and I was the first one. I built 4 of the largest houses ever to be built in Nags Head. They're still there. Nobody else will ever be able to build bigger than what I built. And after I submitted, I did 3 12-bedroom houses. They were right side by side. They were the biggest houses ever done at the time. The town everybody just went nuts because everybody hated big houses. It was like a thing back then. They still kind of fight it a little bit, but it is what it is. Then I did the 16-bedroom. There's a 10,000 square foot 16-bedroom house. And then the day after I submitted that permit, they put a moratorium in place. You couldn't build bigger than 5,000 square feet or 8 bedrooms. So, from that day forward, that's the biggest houses you could build in the area. So I had 4 of the largest houses ever built down there. And, anything can happen. You get certain city council and board, and, they can just change zoning, down zone you. They can stop you from building. I mean, there's all kinds of things they can do.
Yep, they can change your ability of what your exit strategy is. We just had it in Folly Beach. They just passed a no more short-term rental bill, I guess, maybe for the city, where it crushed people's property values because they can no longer sell them as short-term rentals. And nobody wants to live there full time. And so we're curious to see how that kind of works out, because
that's wild, because isn't that what that place is?
It lives off of the tourist. And then they have a certain number of permits they approved, which was more than the houses they currently have or less. So there's no new permits going to be submitted. And then if you sell your home, you lose your permit, so the new owner does not get it. And so the property values are getting crushed right now, in the sense of there's no resale for the rental side.
Yeah,
it's
interesting.
And it's not an area that you'd want to live full time. I live 10 minutes from it. But I would have zero desire to live down there full time with everything going on. So now you've gone from the infill lots, the smaller development, the beach house stuff, and now you do multifamily and neighborhood development. Is that what?
Yeah. So I moved into subdivision development, mixed use subdivisions, residential subdivisions, and then started doing commercial, multifamily, industrial, things like that. So, my geography was limited. Yeah. So I had to broaden my asset type that I was doing. So as a developer, you have a couple of choices. If you want to be narrowly focused on the type of asset you're developing, self-storage, that's all you do, multifamily, that's all you do, gas stations, that's all you do, then you got to kind of broaden your geography a little bit, because your opportunity is going to be limited. Right. I didn't want to travel and do all that, because I was home every night for my kids. And, so while I was doing all of this, building these companies, doing all the things I was doing during that period, I had little kids, and I was there for all their stuff. I coached all their sports. I was home for dinner every night, had weekends off. I took 4 or 5 weeks off every year. I didn't miss a thing. Every event my kids had at their school, I was there. I was the volunteer dad doing everything. Awesome. And, that was important to me. So I didn't travel. And so what I had to do in order to stay busy, and keep everybody busy, was, I had to do different types of things, or at least to grow my investment base. I had to do different types of projects. So, that's why I was able to learn and do all the different things that I did, was because I wanted to stay in a tight little area within my region. And then I had developers, like I said, that I was connecting with and doing deals with, that were doing all different types. So I would do projects with them and for them and learn that way. So, that's kind of how I ended up doing all the things that I did. And the same thing with starting, the companies that I start. So I love to build companies too. Yes. So over the years, people would come to me that either wanted to start a business or they had a business, and I would, either buy their company or I'd partner with them, and we would blow their company up and then sell it. So I did that with a dozen different businesses. So, I'm just your classic serial entrepreneur. I like to stay busy. I like to do a lot of things. I like to stay intellectually stimulated. And that's why I do what I do now, mentoring people all over the country. It keeps me really intellectually stimulated, because I do fewer and bigger, fewer deals now, bigger deals. I invest in markets and crypto. So, a little bit different than what I was doing before. I'm not operating on a daily basis, after running a building company, doing any of that. So I'm a developer now. I lead, delegate, motivate. I outsource everything. I hire contractors to work for me now instead of doing it all in-house. So, very different business model now, 30 years down the road.
Yeah, it's a different phase. And that's what we encourage everybody in real estate, is to understand, like, there's phases of everybody's business. There's you're doing your first lot deal, making $15,000 is a phase. There's a phase of grinding. There's a phase of scaling. Then there's a phase of, hey, I want to be rich dad. I want to be the person that is now using my money. Everybody's coming to me, and then they're doing, all the heavy lifting. And I'm here just to create this vision and lead, whatever it is. So
yeah. And that's what I did all along. So I coached everybody in all my companies. I didn't run any one company on a daily basis. My building company was my main company. I also had a real estate brokerage with it as well. So we did real estate and construction. And, I was the leader, delegator, motivator. I was the coach. I put aces in places. I found great people. I coached them to success. I let them do their job. I let them build the company with us together, and everybody benefited. They all had really good salaries. They all got, 4 or 5 weeks off a year paid. They got bonuses, it was a really good time. And, and then there came a time where I was just done with that. And, I wanted to move to a different level. So that's kind of what you do as you go along. You just evolve to these different levels. And, like now, working on this tech company, I mean, that's going to be, probably $1 billion valuation in a few years. So, it's a lot of fun working on those types of things and scaling that.
That's exciting. So what kind of real estate investor, like what phase are they generally when they come to you looking for mentorship, coaching, kind of where are they at in their businesses?
Yeah, it's different. Like I had the couple that, had been flipping houses for 6 years and they were kind of stuck. And, they never made more than a couple $100,000 in that first year with me. I took, they made 1.3 million. I've got people, I had another guy that's been in real estate. He was one of the top 10 RE/MAX agents in the country in Iowa. And he was also an investor, primarily residential, had a couple of like 4-plexes, 5-plexes. He wanted to get into commercial. So now this guy's been in it for 10, 15 years at high levels. And he found a 4-unit commercial property portfolio for sale for, I don't know, $6 or $7, $9 million, something like that. And he didn't know what to do with it. Didn't know how to take it down. Didn't know anything. He just knew that it had opportunity. So, I showed him how to take that deal down without using any of his own money and ending up with about $1 million in equity in the property and $100,000 in cash flow. So it was a 4-property portfolio deal, no money out of his pocket. It was like $9 million and $1 million in equity and 100,000 in positive net cash flow. So he's been doing it a while. Then I've got people that are syndicating big multifamily deals and, they're, starting at different stages. I have some that are just getting started. They've got some real estate experience. They kind of understand, but I work with a lot of, medical and dental professionals that are getting into real estate and syndicating and teaching them how to do it. I had one group of doctors I took from 100 million in assets to $1 billion. Had another guy that had 500 million already, had already been syndicating, bigger multifamily deals for a while. He's very prolific in this space, Joe Fairless. And, yeah, he's well known in the space. So he was about 500 million when he started with me, and he's over $1 billion now and has sold some stuff, aspects of the company and did some mergers and things, but, just all over the map. And then I've got people that are builders and they're scaling their spec house development business. Maybe they're doing 10 or 20 houses a year and they want to get to 50 or 100. So I'm helping them scale that, or maybe to get into more development. And, I got people that are doing industrial only, just, flex spaces like office warehouse, industrial parks, storage, things like that. So, it's all over the map. I don't have anybody generally that, has zero experience at all. There are some, professionals that come to me that, have never done a deal, but they know, and they've educated themselves to a degree, but most of the people are, have some level of success in their business or their career, that, before they come to me.
Gotcha. And so what's one of the first things that you do for them when you bring somebody in? What's one of the first problems or things that you can change quickly that impacts their business that you try to look at?
Yeah, generally it's the first phone call, where I can figure out exactly what it is that they need to do and need to be focusing on. But that's really it. Taking a look at their business, what they're doing, how they're doing it, why they're doing it, not just their business, but the whole picture, from legal structure, tax structure, their, estate management, all that kind of stuff. And just really kind of helping them figure out what are the 1 or 2 things you really need to be focusing on to move the needle. Because what I find most with people is that there's so many things you can do, so many different types of things you can do, all these shiny objects out there, they don't know what to focus on. Yep. So, that's a big one. Or they don't know how to raise the capital they need. That's a big one. Like a lot of people don't know how to raise capital to scale. So that's a big one that I help people with. And then a lot of them just don't know how to be a leader, delegator, motivator. I've got a client in the United Arab Emirates, that's a builder. He's got 6 different companies. We've got a building company. He's got, marketing company. He's got, education company. And, I'm really teaching him, how do you bring a team together? How do you get a COO, CFO, all your department heads and get them on the same page, moving towards the goal and, accomplish these things. So I've got people that just have, different types of companies that I'm just helping them with their leadership management structure. So usually, I can get on the phone with somebody and take a look at what they're doing, and within a few minutes, pinpoint exactly what they need to be doing, what they need to be focusing on, and what's going to really make the biggest difference for them based on their, God-given gifts, talents and resources that they have.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you nailed one of the biggest ones is focus. There's so many shiny objects, there's seminars, there's YouTube, and everybody wants to do everything. And it really helps in the beginning if you just focus on a certain, for you, like in the beginning, it was like you're more concerned on geography than necessarily asset class. It was like, I'm going to focus on being in this area, be really good at this area, and then I'm going to just grow what I'm doing versus, hey, let me buy in North Carolina, let me buy in Virginia, let me buy in, California and Texas. And next thing you know, you're scattered and not doing any of it really well.
Which is great if you're doing the right kind of asset. So if you're
Correct.
a syndicator, multifamily, and you want 250 units and up, class A and B, you got to go out to these different markets because there's only so many in every market and there's competition. So you have to, again, if you're going to be narrowly focused on the type of asset you're investing in or developing, you got to broaden your geography. But I had businesses too. So I was focusing on just owning a bunch of businesses, owning a bunch of different kinds of real estate, doing all kinds of deals, just kind of staying in my little niche area. And that was limiting to a degree because there's only so much of it you can do. But, for me, what I knew at the time and going along, it was perfect. It worked. I learned a ton. And, now I've got people all over the country doing all kinds of different things. So it's kind of like I'm in all these different markets doing all these different things, so it's a lot of fun.
That's that's really neat. It's really neat to, kind of be a part of a bunch of different things because you can really have a pulse on what the market's like, what different asset classes are like. Because you have people actively doing multiples of different things.
Yeah, I've got people that are just flipping land and, they've been very successful flipping land and, they come to me to scale that, put systems in place, people, and kind of scale, raise money to, do bigger deals in the land development side. So I've got several people I'm coaching that are just flipping land. And, that's where you can do, three things really. You can flip the land just raw, do nothing to it, maybe take a chunk, divide it up, sell smaller parcels, but nothing else. Then you can do what's called paper development, get the entitlements, get it approved. And then it's just, paper approved. You haven't done any actual digging in the dirt and putting anything in. And then you can flip that to a builder. So that's, where you can make even more money than just flipping the raw land. And then you can go ahead and put in the horizontal, improvements and, then sell off lots or sell off parcels and things like that. So, there's a number of different things you can do on the land development side as well and land flipping side.
So is land something, if you could pick an asset class, is land something that you're really big on because you can do so many different things? You can infill a lot, you can build commercial, you can build storage units. Is that something you really kind of push people towards, figuring out how to understand and learn land?
Yeah, I don't push anybody to anything, but everybody has their sweet spot, their understanding and what they're drawn to. So I don't do that at all. I don't tell anybody what they should be doing. Generally, people are already doing something. And, we kind of go from there. But for me, land is, whoever controls the dirt controls the deal, right? So land is where it's at. They ain't making any more land. So, from that Folly Beach area, from where I came from, pretty much everywhere. And right now, builders are hungry for land. So if you can feed the machine, because they need inventory, there's a lot of opportunity in land right now. It's easier to get land than it is to get, existing buildings right now. So that's a real opportunity. And then you have options. You can, sell it, you can build on it yourself, you can keep it and land bank for a while. Like I've had a lot of people ask me about land banking, and, some of the wealthiest people I know, that was their strategy over the years, was just buying land, in the path of growth, where that was going, and just buying land up all around, certain areas, like some of the suburbs of Charleston. If you could have bought all that land up, 20, 30 years ago and, done nothing but sit on it, you're golden. You don't have to do anything. So land can be very good, even agricultural land. Agricultural land, has outperformed a lot of assets, just owning it and leasing it out to farmers.
Yeah. I think you can also do like campsites on agricultural land now. It's something that people enjoy doing is they'll take their farmland and take a piece of it and have it set to where people can come camp on it. And they like that there are cows and different animals. There's so much stuff you can do with it. It's pretty amazing. I had some friends do really well with some of the land banking around Charleston. They owned it in some rural spots and they just got phone calls from developers and the state because they needed roads and different things. And, it was almost kind of like set your price and here you go.
Exactly. Yeah. I guarantee you, no matter where you are, everybody who's watching this right now in your city, in your county, there's somebody who's the majority landowner who's owned most of the land through the years. And it always does very well for them. And, prices are a little different now than they were, back in the day, but you can still do it. You can still, find opportunities, a lot of different ways you can structure deals and do things. And, things like that. It's a little harder unless you got deep pockets to really, bank a lot of land right now. But, some areas it's still, prices still aren't too bad.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, it's definitely been interesting to see. I've talked to my wife and I'm like, where can we, because Charleston kind of has 3 areas that are all going. And so it's trying to figure out kind of on which sides make the most sense and what's pushing, where and when.
So the key to that is the schools. Wherever you see the best schools and the best rated schools, that's where you want to be. That's where the growth that creates value and demand is going to be.
Gotcha. That's a good tip. Yeah, because we've looked at, like I said, there's 3 ways. And if you think of it, one of the ways the schools aren't very good. One of the ways the schools are significantly better. And then the third way is more job dependent because there's nowhere else because it's away from the coast. So obviously building has to go away from the coast because there's no more land to develop over here on the beach. So I didn't think about looking at it from a school's perspective.
Yep.
That makes the most sense.
Yeah. People will move for their kids to go to the schools they want them to go to.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we like to do on our podcast is kind of give 4 tips to the guests that are listening on the 4 pillars of Resimply, which is your data, your marketing, your sales, and your systems. And I know you've talked a lot about systems and processes and scaling. And so we like to try to get from the guest, one of each. And so the first thing I want to talk about is data. So from a business owner, from marketing, from a land developer, what is the data that you like to look at it when it comes to finding a new area or finding sellers or any kind of data set that's really important for you right now?
Yeah. So, the areas you want to be in are the areas in demand. So, that's going to be positive net migration, good schools, good job opportunities, things like that in terms of areas that you want to invest. As far as sellers go, looking for motivated sellers, all the data there that, foreclosure, divorce, utility payments that are behind, tax liens, those types of things in terms of, putting your list together. The biggest thing about a list is, number one, you want to compile it, you want to scrub it and keep it clean, where, anything that you've done deals where it falls off or whatever, you want to segment that list, keep it scrubbed, keep it clean. And when you're, marketing to that list and you're not getting any responses, like you're doing direct mail and you get a bunch of return mail back, then skip trace that stuff and call it. So your list can be used multiple different ways and it can be valuable forever. So don't ever let go of that list, hang on to it. Those are people that, are buyers and sellers, partners, whatever. I mean, there's all kinds of different things you can do with a list of those, but the most important thing is to maintain that list, keep it updated, keep it scrubbed, understand where everybody is on that thing, segment it. You can segment with multiple layers of, motivations and things like that. And you got to have different kinds of lists. You want to have lists, if you're in the single family game, obviously, the different, houses, try to drill down on who that seller is so that you can really go after. Was that, if you've got something that's working, a typical, type of seller or environment that they're selling, like for me, the best deals I ever did were, always probate deals, whether it's land, whether it's commercial, multifamily, residential, always either people retiring or, estate opportunities. So, that's a whole separate list. Then you've got, all your other motivations. And, the biggest thing is when you're dealing with lists and talking to people, the last thing you always want to ask somebody when you're talking to them, no matter what it is you're doing, is, if it's a seller, do you have any other property you'd like to sell? Or do you know anybody else who has any property they'd like to sell? Or anything, any asset, because they could have a business, they could have whatever. And you'd be surprised what that digs up. Oh, you know what? My boss or my uncle or my cousin. So a lot of people forget to ask that last question.
It's amazing how many connections people have and that they won't think about you until you ask them. One thing you did talk about, which nobody's ever mentioned before, is the positive net migration. What is it that you like to see when it comes to an area, when it comes to people coming in and moving in?
Yeah, more people moving in than moving out. So that's positive net migration. So you can say net migration, well, that could be out, that could be netting more people out than in. So you want to make sure that you got more people moving in than moving out. And, generally, if you follow that, they really don't need to do anything else. I mean, if there's people flooding in an area, there's going to be a reason. And it's either going to be jobs, schools, or, some other kind of opportunity, quality of life, crime. As we saw in the pandemic, people getting out of the cities and going to these suburbs, So they had room, plus, prices are way cheaper. You can get more house for the money, those types of things. So, that's the easiest thing to follow is, if you see an influx of people, and this can be, at the state, county, city, neighborhood, block, and position on the street on the block, where you see people flocking that want to be somewhere. So, that's how you've got demand in a hot market, and that's where you want to be.
Yeah, because we talk about, finding spots that people are coming to, and then from there, that kind of lets you know where to go, and then you can start pulling your list that you talked about for the sellers for different motivational reasons.
Yeah, exactly. And, depending on where you're at, if you're flipping land, then and it's just rural land, then you take a 50-mile radius outside of an urban core and you target everything outside of that radius for rural land. A lot of people want to buy rural land for, like you said, to go camping on, hunting on, fishing on, or just to own property. And they don't want to pay a lot of money. They just want to own property. So they'll buy that. So you just, like I said, you take a 50-mile radius outside a city center and then target those properties. If you want to develop, that needs to be inside that 50-mile radius. And it might be tighter than that. But you get around that urban core, that city center, and then you're going to have the path of growth around it where the development and the growth is going. And that's going to be driven and led by, ease of access, roads, schools, utilities, all that kind of stuff. So, those are the types of things you want to look at when you're targeting.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really cool way of visual is like 50 miles outside the city, rural, you're going more space. Inside that, potentially closer, you're going to do a little bit different types of investing inside of that. So the next thing when it comes to marketing, what marketing strategies would you say that have worked really well for you, or you kind of talk to your students about? For obviously they're different asset dependent, but what are some marketing strategies that you like to work with?
Yeah, in the residential game, whether it's land or houses, it's always been a combination of direct mail and voice broadcast. So back in the day, I was using voice broadcast before it was even a thing. We didn't have direct to text, but we had, where I could leave a message on people's answering machine because there wasn't a lot of cell phones. Okay. So, it was just leaving, voice broadcast on their message machines. Now it's very different because all the, everybody gets so many messages and nobody answers, but it's still pretty effective. I mean, the last time I did some farming for vacant land in an area that I was looking for property, I did a voice broadcast and I get tons of response, so, I mean, that's been one of the most effective. Cold calling is very effective, but it's not super efficient. You got to either hire somebody or you have to do it yourself. But all of the top agents in the country, that's what they do. You got to talk to sellers. So it's a contact sport. Somebody's got to talk to a seller, but different markets, different assets, different things work. But for houses and land, direct mail has always been, a top one. Cold calling, voice broadcast has always been good. Some people are having success with texting in some markets. In some markets, newspapers still work. If you've got an older demographic that's still like reading physical newspapers, that can work. TV works really well in certain markets, and radio doesn't work well in others. And then if you really want to own your market, you just do it all, and you do every property in your market and you do everything all the time, then you become a known quantity. And then, of course, there's pay-per-click, Facebook ads, YouTube ads that you can use as well. Like almost nobody uses YouTube ads for motivated sellers. I mean, everybody's on YouTube. Why aren't you there? So that's an easy one that generates a lot of success that a lot of people just don't even mess with. It's like TV. Google pay-per-click is always good. Some markets are better than others. Some times are better than others, and it's not cheap. But that's really effective. I know people that do nothing but that, and they've done really well with it. And then, Facebook ads are good. People are still on Facebook and Instagram. They haven't gone anywhere.
Oh, they're still doing very well. So, and I think one of the biggest things, and you said, it's a contact sport. You have to talk to sellers. So to do that, you have to be consistent. It's whatever it is you're going to choose. If you can't afford to do them all, do them and talk to people. That's what people think. Hey, I'm just going to send some mail or do some calls, talk to 3 or 4 people, and that should work. And that's not how. Unfortunately, that's not how it works. You got to talk to people.
Yeah, and follow up. Follow up is 100% of the game. I mean, I've gotten deals years after I've talked to somebody. Land deals and things. Years down the road. I think the oldest one I ever had was probably 5 years after I first talked to them. And they came out, they came back to me. They said, "Oh, yep, I saved this postcard you sent me, 5 years ago. I put it in my drawer. I'm ready to sell now." And I mean, it's just amazing, what people will do. So always keep the same number. Don't disconnect your numbers that you've used for marketing. Don't disconnect web addresses and all those types of things. People will come back to those and they'll find it. So, if you're in the game for the long haul, you want to hang on to that. And if you're going to get out of the game, sell those to another investor. That's an asset. If you've got a phone number you've been marketing and advertising that has traction, and or an email address or a website address, that's an asset that's valuable to somebody else. Somebody will pay you money for that if you can show them that you've got traffic.
Yeah. So then when it comes to sales, what would be your top advice for sales?
So sales is serving. So my top advice for sales in terms of closing deals, if we're going to talk about sales in terms of closing deals, whether it's a buyer or a seller, you're serving. You gotta listen to what people's needs are, listen to what their motivations are, ask good questions and ask deeper questions, and be a good listener, because that's what sales is. It's all about listening. It's all about serving. It's all about solving problems. The bigger the problems you solve, the better opportunities you're going to have. And it's not about pushing and pressuring and things like that. It's more about listening and letting people tell you and uncovering what the real motivation is. Sometimes, one of the deals I had one time that I bought was a house, and it had 2 lots with it. It came on the MLS. I get tons of deals on the MLS. And this came on the MLS. It had a big price point. Nobody really looked at the opportunity. So I looked at it and I said, okay, there's a house that's got 2 extra lots that I can build on right next door. So, they wanted too much money. I went in and I made them offer. Let's say they were asking $350. I said, look, I can do $250. And they came back and they said, well, we can do $250 if you will go ahead and, buy our house. We need $50,000 to put down on a new house that we're building. If you let us, if you'll give us $50,000, let us stay in the house till the new house is ready, we'll go ahead and take your $250,000. And I was like, okay. So what I did was I gave them $50,000. They put it down on their new house. They were able to stay in this house rent-free for 6 months while their new house was getting built. And I was able to start building on the other 2 lots without paying for the property. All I paid was $50,000.
Yep.
They weren't going to get the rest of their money until they moved out. So that was the catch. The other $200,000 came after they moved out. So I was able to build 2 other houses on 2 lots that I didn't pay for. They stayed in this house. When they left that house, I put another 20 or 30,000 in it, sold the whole thing. That ended up zeroing out the basis in the whole deal. So I sold that for $350,000. So it covered the house, it covered the renovations, and covered the cost of the 2 lots next door. So I had 2 lots free and clear. I built 2 houses on that, sold it, made like $300,000 and some on that one deal. And I only ever had out at any given time no more than $100,000 out, in the process at any given time.
You solved a $50,000 problem for them, and right. People look at it as 350 is what they're asking, when at the end of the day they really just needed 50 grand, and you solved a $50,000 problem for them.
Exactly. So you just never know.
Yeah. And then the last thing, you've talked about it a bunch through here, is with systems. What's a key piece for building systems inside somebody's business that you like to teach or really encourage them?
Yeah, so anything that can be automated and outsourced, that's what we systemize. And a system can be anything. It's it can be a procedure, it can be a software, it can be a job description. There's a lot of things. So that's the first thing that I do is I have people take a look at what does your organization look like? What is everybody doing? And where people get overwhelmed is, I got to create all these systems. What I teach people how to do is take your people, let them create the systems. So anybody who's in your organization, have them document the process and everything that they do on a daily basis, so that anybody could sit in their seat, open up this thing and just follow it and just do whatever it is they do every single day. So, again, it can be a standard operating procedure, written document, and then it can be a software that you're using, that is part of the system, and how you use that software is part of the system. So you want to systemize every aspect of your business. And then as the business owner, you want to look at what's the one thing that I need to be doing every single day that moves the needle forward. Everything else needs to be outsourced, systemized, and automated. And, that's really what I do is I sit down and look at what's your superpower, what's going to move the needle for you and your business, what's everybody else doing. And, then I look at the same thing with them. So you've heard the whole 80-20 rule,
Yep.
80% of your results come from 20% of your actions. What I do is I take that 20% and then I break down that into the 100%. What's the one thing that generates 100% of your results? And that's what you need to be focusing on. And that's what we do for everybody in the organization. And then they all do the same thing. So that everything at the end of the day is automated and systemized so that people are spending time on what matters the most in their role.
Yep. Because it's amazing. People love to just do busy work. They instead of setting things in place to let them work and flow and build. So, because
I'm an efficiency junkie. So I have a couple of unique skill sets, but giftings that I've been given by God that He put me on this planet to do. One is efficient, being able to figure out, simplify the complicated, figure out what everybody's sweet spot is, find champions and coach them to success by putting the right people in the right place and understanding what people's gifts are and putting them in that role versus trying to get somebody to do everything. Most people have a bent that they're really good at, one or two things. And, if you put the right people and the right systems in place to do the right things, everything else takes care of itself.
100% agree with that. 100%. So, well, Greg, I appreciate your time today. What's the best way for our listeners to find you?
Yeah, GregDickerson.com. Yep, all my info is there. YouTube channel, tons of videos. I don't know, over 1,000 videos. GregDickerson.com.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it, Greg. I appreciate your time. Have a great day. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, you as well. Thanks for having me.
Yep.